Hello, I'm Faith Kane. This is the Multicultural Curriculum Reform presentation. I'll be going over Nieto and Bod's Chapter 9, Howard's Chapter 8. I brought in some supplemental materials from one of my curriculum courses, actually, with Dr. Collins, Erickson, Stirring the Head, Heart, and Soul. And then I have a couple of supplemental sites at the bottom for more information. The bottom is a Prezi that actually I found that covers chapter 9 of Nieto and Bode, and it is excellent. I could not make one better. So, but it's very much a summary, which I'm not going to be doing. So if you want some more information, these are both excellent sites. What I am going to be doing is we're going to be looking at these themes, and I've brought in the true spirit of Howard's supportive networks and not going it alone. I brought in a couple of colleagues and friends that I'm going to allow to introduce themselves.
My name is Piero Dor. I am from Lima, Peru. Uh, I went to school there. My K to 11, in that case, experience is from 1984 to 1995. Then I went to the university there too, Universidad de Lima. And then I came to the United States and I studied in Texas State University, UTSA graduate school. And I've been teaching in numerous districts in Texas.
And what do you teach?
Bilingual education in elementary grades, mainly fourth grade. I've done second grade as well.
Okay,
And
so
fifth.
great perspective coming in, very different from mine in many ways. Okay, and then also,
My name is Steve Kane. I was brought up in a military family, so we moved around quite extensively. Went to several different primary schools or grade schools in San Antonio, San Francisco, over in Germany. Post my dad being in the military, I attended school in Detroit, Michigan as well. So I've seen a lot of different areas, different perspectives, and surprisingly, not a whole lot of difference in there. So maybe we'll talk about that at some point.
okay, so another perspective, my perspective, I actually was born and raised in San Antonio. I went to school here between 82 and 94. When I graduated, I went to the University of Texas at Austin, and now I'm at Texas State. I've lived and taught in Dallas. I've lived and taught in Dallas. I lived in Austin and San Antonio, but never outside of Texas. So, okay, the author themes we're going to be looking at are concept-based curriculum. It's a great way to work smarter, not harder, using transferable knowledge. I took basically a concept-based curriculum course with Dr. Collins last semester. And so I'm going to include a lot of what I learned from that class and even give you some examples of the products that I created. We're also going to look at making your curriculum culturally relevant and responsive, and using tech integration to engage and enrich. I'm a huge fan of tech integration in my ESL classes. Then I'm going to pull in a little bit of Howard toward the end and kind of throughout with my colleagues and friends here. And we're going to look at healing through connection and collaboration, and then the networks. These are the presentation objectives. If you want to look at those in detail, you can go ahead and pause it. I'm not going to read through them. Important terms throughout the chapter. We're going to look at mainstream-centric curriculum, and another way you're going to see that reference is traditional curriculum. That's the very Eurocentric, male-centric. You're not going to hear a lot of other perspectives, voices. It's the winners. Concept-based curriculum, which we're going to look at in great detail, with organizing through big ideas and kind of timeless and just concepts. We'll look at the concepts, generalizations, concepts. Then we'll go into Howard La Tierra Transformativa, the place that he calls, where there's a vision of healing and positive change, where he brings his network. They support each other. Lots of perspectives are brought in. The transformationist educators, those that are dismantling the dominance paradigm, healing the wounds, and cross-border connections. So your teachers and colleagues, students, friends, relatives, lovers from other races and cultural groups? Okay, so on this slide, these are going to be your resources throughout the presentation. The first one is a Google Doc. That's your viewing guide, so go ahead and click on it. This will give you a little bit more detail about what I'm going to talk about that's not on the slides. This Google form is what you're going to use. Oh, I would have it open side by side with the presentation. These are your essential questions, your reflective responses. So I'm not going to pause and stop and tell you when to answer them. Just organically answer them as you see, and pause it when you feel ready to answer. And it does go in order with the presentation also. So, and then when you're finished, make sure, very important, that your very last answer, copy it, paste it somewhere, because in the forum, that this is going to be the question. So in the spirit, again, of working smarter, not harder, this is going to be your answer to the forum. You're already building and scaffolding that direction. Okay, and then the culminating activity is a Google site that I built that we're all going to contribute to. It's a multicultural network resource site. I'm going to just briefly give you a preview of that right here, and we'll talk about it more at the end, as it is the culminating activity. Okay, so here's the site. There are instructions on the site. I have done each one of our groups I've created a page for, or at least a tab for. And mine, multicultural curriculum, I already created so that you can see a model of what it can look like, but obviously be creative within the structure. Okay, so we're going to look a little bit at, in the Nieto and Bode chapter, they look at the integration of ethnic content into the curriculum using 4 different approaches. The first one is the problem posing approach, and that's when they're organizing, focusing on a specific culture or a geographic region, in their case, Cambodia. What you might want to avoid if you decide that that's something you or your school wants to try, or maybe your school's already doing that, is Nieto warns about just simply adding color, not going deep enough, perpetuating stereotypes by painting with a broad brush, or exoticizing the others, not seeing things from their perspective, not really respecting and having a deep understanding. What can help you to stay away from that is the problem posing approach is when you're including the interests and ideas of students and the community. You've got to keep your curriculum a little bit more flexible, a little bit more open, because they're actually creating and directing the curriculum and the unit as it goes along. As they ask questions, it can actually show areas of deficient thinking, and then you know where you can work from there. So that's a great way to approach any of the areas that could cause difficulties. And another thing that helps, teachers modeling the learning process by asking authentic questions. A lot of times people tend to shy away out of fear of offending people. And what happens is, by trying not to offend people and avoiding topics, you avoid the people. And that's a loss for everyone. So things to take into account: these can be organized either interdisciplinary or intradisciplinary. One thing about interdisciplinary is you have to have a lot of people on board for that. And I know there are schools that plan over the summers to create these massive interdisciplinary units and structures. I have never worked at one of those. I think that would be amazing. I've also never worked at a school that pushed project-based. That's always been something that I did myself. So if you don't have that, you can still do an intradisciplinary version. You can adapt just your own class curriculum. I do it all the time, and that's not the trend at my school, but I enjoy it. There's a lot of teacher preparation. It's front loaded. You're going to do a lot of work, but what's awesome is once you have created all of the scaffolded documents and assignments and everything that the students need, then they're working, you're facilitating, and it frees you up to actually work one-on-one with each individual student when you see a need area for them. And I love that for my ESL students. While they're all working on projects, I can kind of circulate around, and I see one is having a problem with pronouns. So I'm going to work with that student right there. But another student may not need that. So they're not going to have to sit there bored while that's happening. You need to decide on what your timeline is going to be. Is this going to be a 3-week unit? Is this going to be something that's ongoing throughout the year? And it's really smart if you can use the resources that you already have. So maybe that is like for that particular school in the book, Cambodia. Well, they had community members, they had resources already there, clubs that they brought in, speakers that they could bring in. There's another, idea of working smarter, not harder. I want to stop for just a moment and ask kind of our other guests here what their experiences have been as far as bringing in a perspective of somebody who's gone to school in 2 different countries, in Lima and in the US. Piero, what experiences have you had with this type of education?
Well, as a student in elementary, high school, it's been very, very different. The student body was not homogeneous, but pretty close to it, and it definitely didn't include any multicultural aspects. It was just the Peruvian culture, but not even that. It's a little, I guess, more complex to explain. Lima is kind of a multicultural city. You have more than 80 million people there. So what happened there is that from all the regions of Peru, from all the kind of like the states you will call here, they call provinces, from all those provinces, people migrated massively to Lima. So you have almost half the population of the country concentrated in Lima. So it is very diverse in many ways because you have people from the jungles, people from the mountains, from the north, from the south, and the coast, and then you have the elite too of whites that control the power in there. So you have a diverse population in a way, but it's all considered just Peruvian, and the culture is the one culture, and the religion was the Catholic religion that everybody had to go through, regardless of of your beliefs. It was pretty amazing. There was no respect for your own beliefs as much on that, very little, to be honest. And but then again, it's also very different than here because mainly is privatized system. Only the extreme poor go to the public schools. There are just very few big units because there are very affordable private schools.
And
Small.
if you were somebody from maybe the more elite class there, would you ever go to a public school?
That no, that would be like that was like the threat, right? If you don't behave, I'll send you to a public school. Like kind of like military school or public school. You don't even know which one will be worse.
So the quality of education was
It's not that they had a really bad quality, but they were definitely rough. So that was the scare, the roughness of it. Not that there was lower quality. It's more about the roughness.
so
But the curriculum was definitely only one-sided.
okay.
I would say my experience going to schools on base was actually fairly similar to Piero's, in that the military, going to a school on base is kind of the great equalizer. You're there with the colonel's kids, and you're there with
The privates.
the privates kids, and there's there's not there's not a whole lot of difference. It's kind of up to the kids. There certainly can be. They can carry an arrogance or or lack of wherever they go. But it was um, quite a melting pot. The military itself is quite a melting pot, and so there was quite a diverse
definitely not a reflection of the community
Precisely.
around
Sure.
them. You know,
Very
just
true.
that bubble of military base
Very true. Yes,
protecting them from the community.
that's exactly right.
Okay, and so do you feel like when you were going to school in Germany, did the teachers bring in or use the resource of having outside of the military base walls another country? Do you feel like there were things that you learned that had certainly a German flavor to them at least, or was it absolutely like that? Those were two very separate worlds.
In my experience, I went there from seventh through ninth grade. In my experience, there were two very separate worlds. The one thing that I would say was a uniquely I'm going to school in Germany type of piece was that, for instance, if you're going to school in San Antonio, for instance, Spanish will be a language that you're pretty much required to learn as far as I recall. In Germany, when you're in seventh grade, you're taught German. Um, Other than that, very small difference. Um, I don't think there was anything uniquely European German about the education that I experienced. And I forgot to mention this earlier. My schooling years were from 1972 to
Steve,
1984.
did you have friends, German friends, that went to the German schools around, or did you get to?
I did not. I never made a German friend while I was there.
I do have some German friends that have been through German schooling and Peruvian schooling, and they're very, very accentuated differences. You know, so I will assume that it will have been the same from the American schooling
Oh, sure,
base.
sure. I
Then
would guarantee it. I didn't experience that
interesting.
firsthand. I can't tell any firsthand knowledge of that, but I absolutely agree that that is probably the case. Um, the the trouble with being in the military is that you're very much in a little bubble, and you tend to associate with the kid, or I'm speaking from my experience, the kids who have similar experience coming into your situation. When you're 12 through 15, you're not out there exploring the outside world as much as trying to figure out who you are, um, and you kind of stick to the base that you know. I think once, if I would have lived there a little bit longer, I think I would have expanded my
were
base.
you religious, Steve?
No,
Did school taught you religion, or do you feel like your education in a public school in the United States or abroad gave you some religious viewpoints?
no, absolutely not. In my experience, that did not occur.
And you
Interesting.
did at your school in Lima?
Well,
You guys
I
had
had two different scenarios. One when I was in a Catholic school, of course, it's expected that you are taught that.
yeah.
But then I was in a school that was non-religious, and however, still catechism was still a class, and I was still required to take it
Because that was the way it was in the community.
because
So it was
that's
coming in.
it's a reflection of the
It's
community.
almost
Regardless
understood.
that I wasn't Catholic, but
Right.
nobody will care about that.
Because that's the dominant religion.
Exactly.
And so,
It's
of course,
the
you
dominant, and
Right.
are.
my
If not,
voice
not
was
yet.
not heard. I wasn't the only one, obviously. But,
Right.
our voices didn't really matter. This is what we're teaching. Just do it.
Right. So I want to skip ahead for just a minute. I'm going to skip over the second theme perspective to inclusive curriculum because I just feel this is organically going there. But so in Yato and Bode, they talk about a high school English teacher who pushes for and creates a gay and lesbian literature class. I want to ask you guys, Piero and Steve, when y'all were in high school, did you guys ever have options for classes that were that diverse?
Well, in my schooling system in Peru, there's no options. You know, you don't have electives. You have to take everything. So I took it all. So there's no choice.
Okay.
And but of course, there is no way on earth that you will have had something of gay or lesbian literature as a specific class.
Any clubs for gay or lesbian students or support
No, no,
networks?
no, no. The adult in that time, that was taboo. That was a mockery. Pink Association and all that. AIDS. It was kind of like a joke. Definitely, anybody that would have been gay or lesbian will be very frightened to come out because of the aggressive language that existed all around it.
And so, did you have any students on your campus who were out as gay or lesbian?
Absolutely, you knew who they were, and they were totally bullied.
Were
You
they
know,
open about it, or did
of course
they?
not. They will deny.
Okay,
They
so
will
they were
deny,
not
deny,
out.
deny. Yeah, yeah. I mean, not out like that. I mean, we out him, but you know,
Right. And
but
then,
they tried
Right.
to say no.
Steve,
Yeah.
did you ever have choices about classes that were that diverse when you were in school?
No, I really don't recall. We did have some electives that we could choose from, but I really don't recall anything.
Or
Be
class.
I wasn't a club guy.
Yeah.
I couldn't even tell you. I never looked into
Yeah,
clubs,
I only play sports
any
throughout high
associations
schools.
whatsoever. I was anti-association. So
Why do you think you were like that?
I was a very insular young man. I didn't want to. I didn't want to get out and about. Probably goes back to informing of the way I was in Germany. Maybe it wasn't a military thing. Maybe it was a me thing. Kind of my nature in those days, and to a lesser extent now. I think I've grown up a bit, but certainly in those days, I very much had my tiny comfort zone, and I stuck with it.
Do you think it will have make a difference if your teacher will have encouraged you by being more multicultural
That's
and
what I want to know
and
too.
bringing awareness
And did
and
you ever
and
have any teachers
offering
that
you a
took
clap? Do
an
you think
interest
that'll
in
have
your interest? I know you were really into comic books. Did you ever have any teachers that knew that or took that
foster?
angle or yeah?
No, no, not that I recall.
Yeah,
So
when
it
I
was
was growing up, a
it,
comic book was not is that's not literature. That's
it
just
wasn't brought
that's just
into the
comic book.
classroom,
That's
right?
just comic book. That's not reading. Yeah, that's a comic book.
Right.
It has pictures.
Yeah.
That's not
Well,
reading.
along with being into comic books, I was very much into me and my very small group of friends would write and create our own comic books. So there was some writing, very rudimentary writing, rudimentary art, but a fun attempt at creativity. Um,
But that was just on your own.
totally on our own, and never incorporated or recognized.
So maybe by doing nothing, the school did push you to do your own thing.
Perhaps that could be.
You're a very driven person though, so I think that you were gonna explore your own interests maybe either way. But maybe what you missed out on was um, I don't know, maybe some guidance into doing more with that.
Mhm.
And structure.
Taking some structure,
taking
taking it to the next level, maybe even publishing or
Mhm.
getting out there because you're really good.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was probably a missed opportunity.
It is
but
interesting nowadays. Let me tell you, for example, in the school that I'm currently teaching, for example, there's this kid, and he writes his comic books, and of course, the teacher is so concerned that that gets very foster, and he can actually publish his books. They're looking for resources and
It's wonderful.
venues for him to show his work, and
Nice.
so yeah, I mean, I think there's already a shift in the education system.
And when you were in school, Piero, did you ever have a teacher who did for you exactly what we were just asking Steve?
Absolutely not. No.
Yeah.
I mean, they you know they have
Neither
their
did I.
they have their job that was to teach that concept, and I did have teachers that will allow for conversation, but only if you had something to say. That what that means, if you're a high school student and you have a different perspective, you better bring your book and bring you back it up, you know.
Right. Yeah.
And not many people were willing to do that, you know. I
Yeah.
probably
You're
was
put on
one
the
of the only
spot.
one.
Sure.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And you don't want to debate with a teacher, and your chances are you're going to lose. He
Yeah.
has the power,
Yeah.
you know,
It made you
of
look
direct
like a
the
fool.
conversation. Yeah.
Right.
So, do you guys think if there had been offered, maybe there was an English lit class that incorporated your interests, like comics or Piero, maybe more of like a philosophy type English class? I could see
Or
being
poetry. I
into
used
that
to
or
like
something. Oh,
poetry,
true,
yeah.
poetry. Poetry is a little more mainstream, though. I could see something,
Yeah,
that's
they have, you know, competitions and stuff like that. But you know, I will never submit my poetry, you know, because it was not like their beautiful poems. You know, it's more like a dark poetry. So
it's more those type of interests. It seems like you don't really get the opportunity to pursue until you're out of K through 12 education. And it's
yeah,
kind of
pretty
years
much.
of, if you can make it through all of those years, then you get this treat of having, okay, now we can look at the good stuff. It's kind of sad that you're not looking at the good stuff the entire, all of the
Right.
time.
Right. Very
That's,
true.
you have to wait. And it's hard. I tell a lot of students, because I am a high school teacher, I tell them all the time, like, it's going to be so much better. I hate having to say that. And in my class, I try to make it so much better, but I can't control what's going on in other classes.
Right.
And you shouldn't.
Right. Yeah. Teachers don't seem to like that. So we'll go back a little bit to number 2, examining a particular theme from a variety of perspectives. So if you can teach using theme, some of the things that are positive about that is students are going to bring in their perspective on that theme. You know, if you use something that they all already have
Like, what is
some
a
experience
family?
with, right? You know, so someone whose family is, they are so diverse now. I mean, I could see, you don't think
they
so?
have been diverse for many years, I would think.
So maybe we're just more open about
We're
having
more
diverse
open.
families,
Mhm.
because whoever had
But, I mean,
the
we
father
call
knows
them,
best family
they're
anyway.
called like dysfunctional families, you know, and which is it's a horrible label, but they're very, very, very functional, you know, in many
Right.
ways. More
So,
so than
sometimes
many
definitely
others.
right.
But they call it like that when, you know, when there's a divorce, it's already labeled, you know, where's these things.
Yeah,
You know.
I think it was very much one way until maybe certainly through the 50s into the 60s, but I think even around the early 70s that started to slowly change
Yeah.
and has become more and more predominant. Before that, I think it was very looked down upon, very hush hush, very taboo.
I tell you another interesting fact in the Catholic schools in Peru, and I don't know if it was the same way here. I'm sure it's not anymore, but probably still the same way. I don't know. I haven't been there in over, you know, 12, 13, 14 years, something like that. But to get into a school, your parents have to be married.
Really?
Oh wow.
So if the parents, you don't have a male and female gender married with certificate, and your birth is after the fact,
Oh my gosh.
you know, it's very scrutinized. If it's not like that, you, no matter how much money you can put up, you will not be accepted in the
Really?
school. Yep.
That's interesting.
Isn't there
Which
an
was-
episode of Mad Men that's something like that? Weren't they trying? I feel like there was an interview, a school interview, where they had to pretend that they were
No.
actually together and everything was great or something. I don't know.
Interesting.
I'm sure that
Yes.
happened a lot. I'm sure there were a lot.
I'm sure it happened here too. You know?
Oh, absolutely.
I think that was an episode of Full House.
Great. That was a good one. Okay, so let's keep going and look at, we're really going to break out and go deeper into concept-based curriculum, because I think that really 1, 2, and 3 are all potentially flavors of concept-based curriculum. I think that if you organize in this way, you can use theme if you want to. I always use a problem posing approach. I feel like I get so much more information into a unit if I allow students questions to drive it, because they think of things I would never think of. And then they're coming up with something. And so I love concept-based. We're going to look at traditional versus concept-based. So traditional curriculums are really topics focused. It's facts, memorization, a surface level understanding, or in Erickson, I love the phrase trivial
I
pursuit
have an
intellect.
example. For example, when I was taught about the American discovery, when you're given those facts, about Christopher Columbus, and his marvelous enterprise and his blessings from the Catholic Church and coming, in these marvelous boats to discover this beautiful land in North and South America. Uh, you're not given the big issue at all. They don't give you the concept. They don't give you conquest
Right.
of the weak and wiping out
Right.
civilizations and
Absolutely.
destroying their beliefs,
And so it becomes meaningless.
their culture and their lives, and
Right, it's more indoctrination, not teaching.
genocide. I mean, that's not taught.
Right.
Yeah, it's definitely not organized under those headings. In concept based, you use the topics to exemplify larger concepts. So when facts come in, like for example, well, I'm not going to give an example. We'll look at an example in a minute. So to make it more concrete, students find personal meaning by connecting. So exactly what you were talking about. When you just have these facts in isolation, you have so what?
Yeah.
It's really the so what of lessons. And a lot of times in traditional, I think there is no so what.
You don't get the
You don't
pattern
get it.
of things happening.
In concept-based, develop critical and creative thinking as a benefit of it. It's mind active instead of mind passive. I love that phrase.
The only other thing I would add to that is when you're taught these different concepts, just as isolated little bits of information that you're supposed to remember, it's very difficult to do so, because if you don't have the bigger concept, you're not putting the pieces together.
Right.
And that makes it exponentially harder to regurgitate that information.
You'll never find it.
Yeah. So it's, the concept base for me would, is far superior.
Have you
It
guys
makes more
ever
sense.
have y'all ever been in classrooms where you were pretty sure that not even the teacher had the big picture?
Oh, absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? Do you
Definitely,
feel like a
yes.
lot of times the classes are, you didn't learn in it very much because the teacher doesn't even have a grasp on
Oh yeah.
on the material.
I have
on
two teachers of history. One was the Peruvian history teacher, and the other was the world history teacher. The Peruvian history teacher will just use the textbook, and it will be very strict by the book. And of course, he only knew what he read of the textbook. That's
Right,
it.
right,
No questions
exactly.
asked to that textbook.
right.
Anything that you can bring to that, he will not accept it. It has to be in the textbook. This
Yeah.
is all you need to know.
That sounds pleasant.
That's it. That's pleasant. This is my conclusion.
It's great.
The world history teacher was different. He had a way more open mind on that, but still very topical.
Well, here World
for
History
the
is a
bigger
survey
picture.
course, and it goes over so much material so quickly that there isn't time, if you're going to even cover what's in the canned curriculum. If you're going to cover the material, there's not time to ask a single question. They don't go deep into anything, and I don't see what the point of even taking a class like that is. Only, okay, well, here's the
It's just a
survey.
topic. Then
Now it is just
it's
a
just a topic.
topic.
you're not
It's a
analyzing
topics
what's
course.
happening.
So in concept based, the features are that the knowledge that the students are building and that you're helping the students build is transferable. So it's not in isolation. For example, you're looking at systems. Well, systems, has a place in math, science, English language arts, art history. Systems doesn't mean, you learn this in English language arts. Now, these systems in science are something totally different. No, they're systems, period. Systems exist throughout. In real life, you don't use one piece of knowledge at a time.
In all honesty, I haven't been taught like that until college.
Right.
Yep.
And I put, as B, I said, you learn to read only once. That's something I learned about when I was first starting to teach and I was learning about English as a second language. And I remember having a professor tell me, well, the students already know how to read. You're not teaching them to read. They are, you only learn how to read once. They're learning to read another language. It's different. And that just stuck in my head of, that's exactly right. Like these skills that you use in one, you're going to use in all of them. And it's the same with if you'll organize by concepts, you could be teaching about systems in the science class, math class, language arts class, and the history class all at the same time. And the topics are what exemplifies the systems. Disciplines work in harmony. So in the real world, yes, our knowledge is not isolated by subject. It works together. And I don't see why we ever started teaching it separately.
That's how it's
unnatural.
Yeah,
that's how it's tested. For example, there is this universal screening test. I remember what it's called right now. Oh, it's the PISA test. They take it in every country, and I think it's given to 8th graders or 7th graders, something like that. And one of the parts is, for example, it's a real scenario, like a medical room or something. So they have to apply, problem solving skills with math, with science,
in a real
reading
context.
Yes. So.
Yeah, I've never experienced anything like that again until I agree with Steve until college. Another aspect of concept base are generalizations, and what generalizations do is it allows for personal connections. And when students are making personal connections, that is when they're going to remember the information. Because at night you go to sleep, you have a cognitive dump, and anything that's seen as unnecessary is gone. So if it's not housed under something bigger, it's gone.
But the thing is, a point I want to, put out there with that is, I see many teachers, and you're taught, you're forcing these connections with students. You're bringing, you're pulling. See, you have this experience, and now this. Do you see how it's connected? And they say, oh yeah, that connects. When you're forcing it, they're not their true connections. They're
Right.
still not authentic learning.
Right.
I'm just putting that out there.
Yeah, I like that point. And I will tell you, the more I've worked with the ESL reading classes that I've had at the school that I'm at, just because of the situation and the flexibility that I have teaching an elective, I feel like I've gotten more and more comfortable with project-based learning, with concept-based units, because I don't have the pressure of somebody coming in and saying, this doesn't look like what I think learning should look like. And when that, it's taken me maybe 2 years for that fear to shed.
Mm-hmm.
But as I lost the fear of somebody coming in and not liking what they see, which is so embarrassing after like 15, 16, 17 years of teaching, that you still feel that way, even though it's
teachers,
not right.
Of course, you have a standardized test that is coming, and
right, the pressure.
If you cannot back it up with that test, then
learning doesn't happen fast. Sometimes, learning doesn't always happen fast. Learning doesn't happen pressured very well.
Some do.
Maybe
Pavlov will disagree on that.
Yeah. Well,
in the military.
I will say, as I've gotten more comfortable and I don't feel hurried, I am watching the most authentic learning happen in my classes with my students that I've ever seen.
Yeah, but you definitely
it works,
time
but it's
to process the information,
Oh, yeah.
Make your own connections, and as teachers or educators, I think we should give a little more time to process those thoughts.
And number 4, differentiated assessments highlight student strengths, student choice. It is something I'm constantly trying to embed more student choice into my lessons. I think that when you allow students to choose, there's instant buy-in. Or,
Right.
I mean...
Right, it gets them interested in actively thinking and wanting to.
It is easier with a small class, though.
Yes, it is.
That's the challenge of teachers in high school with these large, big clases, and how do you?
Some of our biology teachers have 45 students.
So much work,
Yes.
It's unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
If you're if you want more, I found a couple of videos that were excellent about giving you a really in-depth look at concept-based curriculum. And this one, the last one, if you have time or when you have time, it's very entertaining. It's informative, but it's also very entertaining. Here is a graphic where I think this gets a little bit more concrete. You can see that from top down, it starts with the generalization, the concepts, the topic, and the facts are there as examples. It is not, I think in education, sometimes it's just right here. It's just these facts.
Yeah,
They start here and you're never going to have time. They think they'll
facts
maybe
are
get somewhere.
also,
You never get here. You start here.
Subjective sometimes to perspective. And then there are many forms of knowledge, that's just one form of knowledge. There are many other ways to acquire knowledge.
And what facts are brought in? Mm-hmm. Right. I mean,
facts
they're coming
who,
from,
right,
according to
it's
who?
very subjective.
Like, for example, America was discovered in 1492. Fact, really? You have the Vikings, you have the Polynesians.
Let's check the Trivial Pursuit card. I believe it is.
There's populated, so, and we still say that's a fact, and that how can that be?
Exactly.
Okay, so if you want even more, I've referenced, this is the course I took actually through Dr. Collins. CI 5359 is Curriculum for Depth and Complexity. And I included right here, this is my culminating project, so you can see the product of the class. And I actually, as I built this curriculum, I used it in my ESL classes, and it was kind of what kickstarted me into the world of concept-based. I realized, like Piero had said earlier when we were talking about this presentation, that he already teaches that way. He didn't realize that it was called that. And I said, that's kind of what I realized when I took that class is, I'm already doing this. But it gave me I loved learning how to structure it and scaffold it beyond where I was already at. And so it's a very intense class, and your product is amazing, but it's very usable in your courses. So if you want more, you can check out mine. And then obviously Dr. Collins' class is a semester of that. Okay, so the last Nieto and Bo topic I want to talk about is tech integration. Use your tools. Tech integration makes differentiation so much easier, bringing in different perspectives.
What barriers do you see there?
Resources.
Right.
And the only reason that I'm able to do what I can do is exactly like we use tech every single day. I now have my courses probably 99.9% paper free, and I love it.
Nice.
And if I ever got, I don't know, I think after loving it so much and having everything I've created over the past few years in Google, I would figure out a way to use Google even if I couldn't find a lab somewhere. If that means like I'm going to have the students do a fundraiser and try to each buy their own Chromebook. So there are ways, but I also have a small group of students. If I needed 180 Chromebooks, that's not going to happen.
It's a little tougher. Yeah.
So the resources are the barrier, and that's what I hear teachers. Okay, so Friday I went into a classroom and I had an ESL student in there, and I wanted to check on her because they're doing a research project. And what was cool is we had done in my ESL class with her, I had done a research project on conflict last year, and she had already chosen drug abuse and done all of this research and created a web page. And I told her, use what you already have.
Work smarter, not harder.
Yes, work smarter, not harder. I said, you have the site there, go to the site. You already have your thesis written. For someone who, she's going to be pushed. She doesn't get any accommodations. Should she? Yes. But she's going to be pushed to go as fast as the other students. She'd fall behind. But with the site she already created and all their, so I was excited. Well, I went in and they were having to do research on their phones because the teacher had misbooked the lab. So instead of using the lab to do research, can you imagine doing a research project on your phone?
Yeah, no.
That was her attempt. And I looked at the
you're
student.
Trying,
yes.
To connect. I see this struggle. But...
I looked at the student and I just said, are you kidding? And she said, no. I said, how's that going? And she just rolled her eyes like, it's not. I was like, wow. I said, well, you know what? If you need to work on it in our class, you can.
Yeah, I have access to what I write on my Google Docs too, so I can do it on my phone. But I'm not gonna sit down on my phone and write a
It's
book. You know.
difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You're not
Absolutely.
going to do your best work. You can't really, I mean, it's very difficult to read. And some of their phones are very small.
I give you another tragedy though. Like in my classroom, for example, I have 2 desktop computers for the students, 2 Chromebooks, and I have a bunch of like Kindles and things like that that we could all be using. But there's only
Chargers.
two outlets
Yeah.
for electricity.
Wow.
So, and you cannot you cannot put the so
It's,
it is just one of those things.
and that's why a lot of teachers just still don't bring tech in. It is so
or some districts
difficult
have
on
so
top
much
of how
restrictions,
difficult. Yes,
or
right.
you cannot bring your own tech, or even
Right.
have donations.
They won't support the
They have
Chromebooks.
to, they have to.
That's why I want my students to buy their own. I
District
mean,
has to take over. It has to be through them, and they
Right.
have to own them and label them and tag them and all that because they'll have to be in their network and so.
so, yes, a lot of barriers to using tech. If you can use tech, I have
But it
linked.
is awesome when you can use it.
Yes, it is. Especially with, I mean, with Google Classroom, you can push out a different assignment if you're have
and with kids
students
with
at different levels,
disabilities, it
right?
helps them
Yes,
too.
and the
It's
tools
a
they
software
have.
to help them to write and type and
Right.
everything, so.
Teachers are always like, well, they're not, this ESL student's not performing that way in my class. What tools are you giving them?
Well,
I was like, well, we have computers.
what tools do I have?
And I would say send them to me, except that I don't have a classroom. I just have to go find those computers for us every day. Okay, so anyway, sob stories aside, I'm just going to show you some examples of work that my beginner ESL students have done, and I'll go over it quickly. You can come back and look at it. But we did, this is a scaffolded assignment where we gave them a poem. I actually used an assignment that I built from my technology grad class at Texas State last year. And anything I do for grad school, I pull into the classroom immediately, of course. So here's the mimic poem that the student wrote. And then it could have stopped there, but to make it really come to life, we had them read it because we're incorporating the speaking and listening. And I also wanted to show teachers the videos so that they could understand that the students they say can't speak can actually speak. So in Adobe Spark, they read their poems and they added pictures.
Where I Am From by Luis Ramirez.
So you can go back and check that out if you want. The work that they do when you're using technology, it's applicable to future endeavors. It's things that they can use for the rest of their lives. And I kind of look at my ESL students that way, where I want to, if I think of what can they leave high school with, I want them to know how to use tools no matter what they're doing. I don't know what they're going to end up doing. I don't know if they're all going to go to college. Half of them go back to Mexico in the first year or two that I have them. But I know that they can use these tools if nothing more. I want to teach them to help themselves. Again, the differentiation it brings in: empower, don't enable. I love this. And when you teach them to use tools for themselves, that's what you're doing. You're not standing there, translating it for them. I just was thinking how I'm going to skip that, but alternative assignments. I know Dr. Collins hates calling it alternative assessments, because she says that those are just assessments. And I love that they're all why is it called alternative assessments? Just because you're doing a portfolio or just because you're doing, a debate. Those are not alternative assessments. Those are good assessments. So I included in here, our semester exam was the students created digital portfolios of the work that they had done all year. And this is one of my beginners. He had been here for a semester. So he created a page about, this kid is absolutely gifted. He's a gifted student. And because of his language, there is not a single person on my campus who would probably agree with me. Maybe a math teacher. But that's why I got certified to teach gifted and talented, because I will give them what they're not going to get in the mainstream. So work that they did over the entire semester is now in here. And when they graduate, he's been adding to this now this year as well. So, I mean, it'll be something they can be really proud of and see their own continuum of learning and language learning. Another awesome technology thing. Okay. So the last thing I want to pull in is from Howard. His last chapter was short, but it was awesome. It was very much about building supportive networks. And I'm going to read the last quote first. I just put 3 quotes here that were some of my favorites. And he says, "We also know that significant social shifts are usually spearheaded by a relatively small number of visionary thinkers." And I feel like that's Piero and Steve, who I brought in today. I feel like this is my small support network. And sometimes I think that the ideas that we come up with, that we are the small group of visionary thinkers and other people have their small group of visionary thinkers. And,
Right.
You work on the small things that you can. And if you try to attack things at the top, the big issues, it's just defeating. And I just think that my support network is very important to me.
Oh, absolutely. We definitely feed off each other's experiences and
Absolutely.
and knowledge on these things that we acquire through our different experiences and our different search for knowledge.
I think half of what I've ever brought into my class over the last 17 years was stuff that Steve has shown me about music or taught me about, things that I didn't know. And I'm like, that's awesome. I'm taking that in class tomorrow.
Yeah, I always thought I was a music connoisseur, took this music class in college and I almost failed it. I barely passed it. It was sociology of music. I thought I was going to do so well.
That sounds like an awesome class.
It does, yeah.
The sociology of music, I love it.
It is. One of those things,
You're right. Well, it's also very subjective. It depends
Exactly.
who's teaching it, how they're
That's
teaching it.
true.
And
Exactly. The problem with it that I didn't do so well, it was because it's an online class and I was not familiar with the format just yet, But yeah.
that could get in the way.
Yeah. Those timelines, man.
Yeah, well, I think it's important to discuss things. We do a lot of discussing, and visionary thinkers. It's a term. I think that people who just see things that maybe they think are wrong or should be better, and by engaging other people from different backgrounds in these discussions, you wind up with all sorts of conclusions and avenues to pursue that you wouldn't have.
Yeah, even when you
On your
look
own.
back at all these historical figures, all these historical intellectuals, they always have these pen pals, across the
Mhm.
oceans or
Right.
across cities,
Exactly.
that they're
Yes.
always networking to get their info and to get their input and their knowledge and their feedback and all that. Very interesting. Very
That's-
necessary
that's-
to their own
yeah.
growth.
That's very true. Yes.
I think sometimes if you don't surround yourself with people, even if they have the, different ideas better, but like people who are open-minded, like you were talking about, Steve, it helps you not feel like you're crazy. Because I feel like when I go into work, I just can't find a lot of people who are open to making changes or get excited or like want to try
Right.
something new. And I feel like if that's all I had, I don't know what I would do.
It's very stifling.
Yeah.
It's probably more out there than we might think, but people are kind of afraid to voice out or have the venue to do so. We
The
have all
time to
these
even make those
structures.
relationships.
Well, there is some times that are given for those. We have what's the PLCs and stuff like that.
But those are exactly what you're talking about with the students, where you can't force things. You know what I'm saying?
I know.
It's a lot of going through the motions, and I know that they want to build in PLC time.
But
Our PLCs are awful.
It should not be lesson planning. It should be just discussion of
Right.
colleagues, and that's it.
And I think it'd be awesome
That's
if it
what
was
it's supposed to be
interdisciplinary
it.
too.
And that's
Not
that's
English
exactly
with
what it should
English.
be, And
Different schools
many,
are different, and I'm sure there are awesome things going out there in different pockets.
my last elementary was just dictated by the principal. Principal would just sit there and tell us what to do, and it's just data analysis. It was nothing
I am your professional learning
collaborate.
community right
Exactly.
here. Okay.
Just learn from me. You're gonna read this book, or we're gonna.
So
whatever,
point being that
it's wonderful.
we encourage you, if you're already a teacher, or if you're not a teacher yet, especially if you're already a teacher, you probably have some type of support network, or you wouldn't still be teaching. If you're going to be a teacher,
And get one. If not.
find your support network. It doesn't even, Piero and I don't work at the same school. We used to work in the same district, but I mean, you stay in touch with those people. And Steve's not a teacher at all, not professionally, but he teaches me all the time. So that's
guru.
our last slide is what it's all about. So networks, don't go it alone. I really, thinking back, over the last couple of months for this course, I just can't believe how much information has been coming at us. It's been amazing. It's awesome. And I know that I want the next year to digest it all. So I thought what would be really cool for the culminating activity for this chapter, since it's almost the last chapter, is, and it, and Howard does say that it's very important to have supportive networks when you're going to try to make changes to systems that are very powerful and very intimidating. So in that vein, what I wanted to do is I built a multicultural reform Google site, and I thought that we could each
This advocates for a change of the system within the system, right?
Right. So what I did is I built a tab for each one of our groups, each one of the topics that we all have covered, and I have instructions on the front. I'm not going to read you the purpose. I'll let you go through that yourself. The instructions are here of how you build it. If you've never used a Google site, it's very easy. It's actually so simplistic. Some people don't like it because you can't make a lot of changes. I think it's great when you're not trying to build something that's overly complicated. So I followed the instructions exactly, and I built my page. So you can see just an example, be creative. I am not trying to make a bunch of work for everyone. This is just bringing in what you've already done in a place where we're all co-collaborators on this site. So you'll have access to this site until Google crashes, until it doesn't exist anymore. And by then we'll probably need a little bit more than a Google site support network. So
once everybody depends on it, they're going to charge you.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so if you will, I posted my presentation here, my viewing guide. It's just a chance to go back over. I kind of cut and paste major themes, just a way to have the information at your fingertips later. Maybe you will want to go back over it. You will want to revisit. And then I put in resources some sites that I think are awesome for adding, or creating more multicultural curriculum, adding to my lessons. This is a book I'm really excited about. So I put a picture in there. I just got this book called History Lessons, and it's history, U.S. history lessons from different countries. How is this taught in this country, that country? Anyway, that's true multi-perspective. I thought that was very exciting. So this is the final activity.
Some truth.
And I hope that you guys, it's something that you will use and reference in the future. Also, sometimes you want to tell someone else about your class, like, oh, I wish you had just seen. Well, use this site so that we can enlarge our networks and recruit others into our cause. So thanks for listening, and have a great rest of your evening.